Good morning and welcome everyone to this summer session, to this webinar about AI and AI agents. Well, my name is Guus van der Mond and I will be your host for the next hour. I will update you on this topic. We thought, well, it's summer, everyone will probably be on vacation. But there are still a lot of people who are at home or working or at least interested in this topic. Because we still had quite a few registrations. Well, I have prepared a program to take you into the wonderful world of AI agents. I must say that originally we had thought it would mainly be about product data and e-commerce. But I saw in the registrations that quite a few people had signed up who were simply interested in AI agents. So we have adjusted the program a little bit. The first part is more general about AI and AI agents with some practical applications. And in the second part, we will go more into product data on the e-commerce side. Well, we have prepared a brief introduction about myself, but especially about the company Squadra Machine Learning Company. And then we will delve into what AI is. There are also a lot of terms, and I think it's good to clarify those different terms. And explain what they are exactly and how they have led to AI agents. Well, then a number of practical examples from practice that you could possibly apply yourself. And in the last part, we will delve more into AI and AI agency for product data. We tried to keep it a bit interactive, so we have included a number of polls. So if that's okay, you can also answer some questions on the screen later. Some polls or some statements we present. At the end, I have a Q&A where you can indeed also just use chat, or you can possibly bring it up on the screen. If you raise your hand, we can also bring you into the webinar, and then we can at least answer a few more questions. Well, if there are other questions, you can always ask a private question. I will look at them less during the presentation, but I have some colleagues who are also looking, so feel free to ask them, and we will try to answer as many questions as possible. Well, first a bit about ourselves. I am the founder of Squadra Machine Learning Company, part of the Squadra Group, and we focus on applying data science and AI, and we do this a lot for suppliers, wholesalers, retailers, and marketplaces. But of course, we also have other clients outside of that whom we also help with this. We are therefore often involved with companies that also sell products like those retail wholesalers. And we have developed a standard solution for that. That is the Power Suite. Well, I will go into that a bit further in the second part of the presentation, where we aim to help elevate that product data without too much manual work. And with the help of smart AI, ensure that the products are easily findable and sell well. In addition, we also do various projects, and these projects increasingly involve AI agents lately. Because it is truly a development that is going to change quite a lot, just as AI has already changed quite a lot in the past few years. Well, we work for clients in that area, so I have also listed a number of clients below. Yet the retailers are the most well-known, so Praxis, Bol, Zeeman, Wecamp, we do HEMA, etc. But also on the wholesale and supplier side, we have very interesting and great clients there as well. Well, let's continue, especially about AI and AI agents. Well, I'll start with a few. I actually start with a poll, indeed, because I wanted to know in advance, well, are you already familiar with AI agents and do you already use them? So if all goes well, we will now also give you the opportunity to fill that in because I'm still curious. And it's okay if they say, well, I don't exactly know what an AI agent is because it's quite new. So don't hesitate to indicate that. By the way, it's anonymous, so we won't see it further. Or at least other people cannot see what you fill in and whether you already use it or not, or whether you use it for business or personal purposes. So I'll leave it up for now, and we can come back to it later. So this way, people have the opportunity to fill it in the meantime. It will run for another minute, and then it will automatically turn off. But I want to start with a general explanation of what AI is, because ultimately there are quite a few different concepts about what AI exactly is. Well, AI is actually a kind of concept where systems and machines eventually mimic a bit of human intelligence, as if it seems like a human is performing it. And that is quite different from what we call traditional software development, because that is always based on rules like if this, then that. And with AI, you actually have a kind of human intelligence that can also perform that. And the key there is really pattern recognition, because that is something traditional software is not very good at, and where AI is very strong. There are all sorts of techniques for that and various terms. So I just call it AI, let's say the overarching concept. And within that, you have a number of techniques. One of those techniques is machine learning.
Well, it has actually existed for quite a long time. That actually started in the late 1970s.
And in fact, it comes down to saying, well, I have a whole lot of data, and I actually give that data to an algorithm. Well, it starts working with it, and then it can suddenly make good predictions based on what it has learned from that data. Shall we give some further explanation? After that, the term deep learning might have been heard as well. It's actually a bit of a specialization of that machine learning, where we said, well, let's see if we can also recognize images and audio and video very well, because machine learning wasn't that good at that yet. And let's see if we can do that in a way similar to how our human brain works. This has been called deep learning. That was a bit in the early 2000s. Well, a very powerful development. And from that, generative AI actually emerged. Gen AI, that is actually also the ChatGPTs of this world. The Gemini or Claude is with the present day large language models, as they are called, to basically give commands, ask questions, so that it can mainly create things or understand and summarize things for you. And from that, those AI agents emerged. And I will, of course, go into those AI agents further later. Well, they are actually smart AI components that are extremely intelligent on a specific subject and can execute that independently. So that means that if they encounter something, something goes wrong or doesn't go as they want, they are able to fix it themselves. And the nice thing about those agents is that you can also line them up, and then you actually get a whole structure of agents that I can also have controlled by an agent. So, well, we will explain all of that shortly. Let's go back to the beginning. The first phase is machine learning, and I have also included deep learning with it. Yes, I call all of that wave one, and in that sense, it is up to around the year 2000, so from the 1970s to 2000. And I call that a bit the traditional AI. Why? Super powerful. We can do a lot of things with it. But really, since the arrival of ChatGPT, which was released at the end of 2022, you have a new form of AI that is truly different from that first wave and has also changed a lot. We see that reflected everywhere in daily life. A few years ago, we didn't know it yet, but now almost everyone uses some form of ChatGPT because it is really powerful and adds a lot. But now we are with those AI agents, and I actually call that wave 3. And why? Because to indicate that it is really something new again. And we were already a bit shocked by what generative AI could do. Well, we will certainly also be surprised by what these AI agents can already do and what they will be able to do in the future. That is really something new. So in that regard, it is truly a new development that will change the world even more than it already has.
Well, I'll start at the beginning with machine learning. How does that work? Well, I'll try to explain it simply. Suppose I have data about the land area, data about the selling price of houses.
Well, you can just say, well, this house has this price and this house had this price. Well, by the way, these were originally dollars. So for this price, you can't buy much of a house anymore. But it's about the idea. And if you take one parameter from those houses, for example, the living area, then you can make a graph like this. Then you say, okay, a large house costs around 500,000 euros and a smaller house costs around 200,000 euros. Well, everyone still understands that. And the essence of machine learning is that you actually say, well, I actually give this data to an algorithm, and it will then, let's say, predict a formula in this example. Actually, a super simple straight line that says, well, okay, if I then have a new value, suppose this is where they always end up, and then I end up approximately here. So instead of making all sorts of rules, like if this, then that, I just provide data, and those algorithms will create a formula where I say, well, if I then have new data, okay, then I indeed also have a prediction of the outcome. And now that sounds very simple, but it is really different from what has been done until now, let's say, with many software packages. And that was mainly done with all sorts of rules. If this, then that, yes, then you process that in a piece of program code, and often a programmer has to do that. Yes, and if that changes, then the programmer has to adjust something. While with machine learning, I actually say, well, I actually have that data. We call that a training set. Well, then an algorithm gets to work with it. And eventually I just have a piece of software where I can request something, provide an input, and then a value comes out. And we actually see in this way, yes, that it actually brings many new possibilities, which traditional software development could never really do. Well, this is, of course, a very simple example. In practice, it is, of course, much more complex. Just look at those houses. Yes, the ground area is not the only parameter. It is also about the cubic meters of volume, the number of rooms, if there is a swimming pool, etc., etc. And it is almost never a linear thing. And often it is something much more complex, but the essence is actually the same. So basically, I say I have data, and then the algorithm gets to work to create a certain model that can then give a good prediction of your inputs. Well, that's what I mentioned was already thought of once in the 1970s. Well, eventually it became more mature over the decades that followed. Also because much more data became available and computers became faster, because it requires quite a lot of computing power. And ultimately that led to really nice and smart applications. Well, if we then look at the next step, we come to that learning. And there you see that at a certain point it was thought, okay, that machine learning is super good with data in tables and such, but it is not so good with images and in videos and audio. And then people looked at whether we could do that in a different way by actually examining how the human brain does it. Well, it was also said, okay, we are going to take a completely different approach where we actually divide all, let's say, evaluation into different layers. Well, I can best explain it using this example. Suppose as humans, we see a photo or we see a cat in real life, then we know, okay, that is a cat, but how does that actually work in the brain? It actually goes through a number of layers. And well, that has somewhat inspired mathematicians. And they say, well, can't we also do that in the field of deep learning, of machine learning? Can't we also apply that? In fact, you should see it like this, that actually, let's say, that first layer only sees a bit of the global things. So to speak, a round shape that could be a face. Well, the second or third layer says, yes, okay, I also have two small circles in the middle and maybe another one in between. And the third and fourth layer then says, okay, then it could be a face because maybe they are eyes, maybe it is a mouth. And eventually the last layer actually looks and says, oh yes, there are whiskers, and a dog, for example, doesn't have that, but a cat does. Okay, then it must be a cat. So in this way, and in different layers, the AI becomes increasingly smarter. Well, you can also train it a bit like machine learning by simply giving it a lot of pictures and saying, well, this is a picture of a cat. And if I also have many other pictures of a dog, then it quickly learns to discover the difference between cats and dogs on its own. Well, very powerful. After that, some other things came up. I won't go into that right now. And that was actually a bit of the basis at a certain point for Google, who said, gosh, if we can apply these kinds of techniques to language as well, so that if I talk about a certain word, I can actually find a certain synonym for it, right? Because if you search for something on Google, yes, then it's nice if you also understand that other synonym, because you can find better search results with it. Well, I took the example here of combining data and also mapping the relationship between those words. And for example, if I say Maxima, then most people also think, well, that is the Queen of the Netherlands. So establishing that relationship, for example, well, what do they call it? The transformer model? Well, never mind. Ultimately, an OpenAI said, okay, well, if that can be done, that's great. But could we also make it so that if I give a certain sentence, can it then also complete that sentence? Well, for example, the Queen of the Netherlands is Maxima. Well, and they call that a GPT. That is also the abbreviation that is, of course, in ChatGPT. And she said, well, if we put a lot of data into it, then it actually becomes very smart and can find all those connections. And then you actually get a situation where you say, okay, but then I can indeed not only have my sentence completed, but I can also just say, well, I'm going to ask a question. Who is the Queen of the Netherlands? Well, then you also know that is Maxima. So that's basically how that is structured. Well, after that, many different versions came from the ChatG. version 3.5 was actually the first real one that was publicly known. And eventually in November 2022, it was announced that in August next month, we will get ChatGPT 5. Well, it seems to be a new version that is even more powerful than all the versions combined. Well, so that has been the development up to now. Actually, you see, if I go back in history, and this is also Peter Duker, who is a certain consultant, and he actually said, okay, if we look over the past 50 years, let's say, we have mainly increased the productivity of manual labor, especially in factories, of course, with all the mechanization and assembly lines and robotics that have been added. But ultimately, in the coming time, it will mainly be about achieving the same productivity gains, but specifically with knowledge workers. Because that was always very difficult. Yes, it was in people's heads. It was very difficult to automate. But now through these kinds of techniques, you see that it is indeed heading in that direction. Well, of course, we don't just have ChatGPT. By now, there are also all sorts of other initiatives. I won't go through them all, but the most important ones are Google, Gemini, and Dropback Cloud. Well, Meta and Perplexity and Microsoft are also active in that. You have a European initiative, which is Mistral, and a Chinese one, which is DeeplySeek. Well, the rest are all separate models for images, for video. I won't go into that further. Yes, but that world has changed very quickly, of course. And that also brings us to the latest development, where you indeed have AI agents like AI, and that we have arrived there. Well, what is that? That is actually, let's say that I have an AI model that is actually specialized in a certain thing. So it is focused on a specific problem, and it can solve that very well. So it is just trained in that. It knows everything about it and can do it very well. He is also designed to adjust himself if he gets stuck or makes a mistake. And what he can also do is say, well, I've received a question here that I can't answer all at once, so let me break it down into different parts. What he also says is this is actually the next step towards AGI. AGI is the term where you say, well, that is autonomous general intelligence. It was also the term to eventually have AI that is as smart as humans. Now we already have models that are as smart as humans in a certain area. But there is also not a single model that is as smart as a human that can do everything. That is actually the race that is currently underway. And this is actually the next step in that. Well, this is really super powerful. And I will show some examples of that shortly. If we look at an example, and this is an example of PayPal, which everyone knows. Then you could say, okay, PayPal also wants to be able to detect possible fraudulent actions. Well, then you could say you create a piece of software for that. But in this case, they also said, let's create 3 agents. One agent is mainly focused on monitoring. So it is very good at checking and reviewing all those large amounts of payments. Well, is there something strange among them? Well, if that's the case, then it doesn't solve it itself, but it sends you to a second agent who says, well, okay, I am very specialized in assessing those possible fraudulent payments and determining whether it is a fraudulent payment or not. So he's really good at that. And if he finds a fraudulent transaction, he passes it on to the action agent. That action agent then actually takes those actions, notifying account managers, etc. So by dividing it, you actually get really smart AI involved. I'm still really looking at the polls. I'm going back because I see that we have about 20% still have no idea what AI agents are. I hope that after this webinar that is resolved. 32% do not use it yet, and 22% do for personal use, and 28% also for business use. So good to know, and thank you for this input. We will take that and come back with some more questions later, and then we will summarize everything for you at the end. Well, if I take another example, this is also one of the projects we recently did. And then you say, okay, well, we have quite a few processes in organizations where people are actually busy looking at what comes in, looking up in system A. then do something with it or discuss it and then update in system B or something like that. Yeah, well, this is an example of a return process. This is a client of ours in UK. Well, they make all kinds of fans. Well, they sometimes get them back, of course. They receive an email with an attachment. Now, attachments can be a handwritten note. It can also be a PDF in which it is actually registered in kind. Well, that's a mailbox where they also come in. And now you have a team of people there who assess that. They open the email and they then look to see, okay, do I know that order? Do I know that customer? Do I know that product? Is it all correct? And if it is, then they proceed, just like entering it into an ERP system, so that product returns can be reported and payments can be made, etc. So, well, that whole process, that's typically a process I just described, and you can also automate it well with those AI agents. Well, mail comes in, and there's an AI agent specifically focused on recognizing those emails. So is it about returns, or was it perhaps a question? Or is it perhaps an order? Or is it perhaps a completely different email, an invitation for one or more other drinks? Well, then it will review everything and say, only take out the emails that actually concern those returns. You then forward that to a second agent who will check, okay, does everything stated here actually match? And I will verify that with various other sources. Maybe if it's a certain exception, like, yes, it is being returned, but it just broke and it doesn't seem to be our fault. Well, then it might go into a different flow eventually. If it meets those conditions, then you are registered, and a third agent does that, and then the settlement payment, etc., is all handled automatically. So a certain flow no longer requires any human intervention. This means that you have actually automated part of that work, and those people now have time to do other things. Well, this is quite a nice example. You see this quite often because there are also many of these kinds of processes in companies nowadays, and we can easily automate them with this. Well, I have another case that is somewhat similar, but in this case, it is about sales orders. And I want to discuss it with you in a bit more detail so that you also, how does that work then? Well, this is also how it works then. In this case, an email also comes in. Now, it must be checked in that mailbox. Is it about a sales order? Or is it perhaps about a purchase location or something else? Well, there's often an attachment. Now, that attachment probably contains the order information. Great. We would like to extract that from the PDF. So which product is it? Which customer? How many are there? What is the price, etc.? Well, that must, of course, be checked with the data to see if the product is indeed correct. Is the price correct as well? Is it also a known customer? And you also have a number of business rules with that. You say, well, okay, we always deliver that. In this example, we said, well, in principle, we deliver it unless the stock is too low, below a certain minimum stock, then the customer doesn't get everything. Then they only get a part X or percentage of the total. He will then receive that. And eventually, it must end up in the system so that it works automatically. If you look at how we can automate this with AI and AI agents, then I do need a piece of AI for intelligently reading those emails and checking if it is indeed a sales order. I have those attachments that I need to process. Is what is stated there correct? I need something that connects all those steps together, a kind of workflow engine. Well, I also need smart agents to compare that again. I said, in this case, to see if we know the product. Can we check the stock? Do we know the customer? The business rules that exist, and ultimately just an export to a certain XML format so that it can also be used in the ERP. Well, and what we can do then is say, okay, let's also make use of those AI agents. Now, I do have a mailbox here. I've also opened it here, so I'll just grab it, and then I can show it live. Well, this is one. So I indeed have it here on that order where I then open. But how does he open it? No idea for a moment. Back to this. This order is in there. It is PDF with indeed just the quantities, the product itself, etc. Well, we would like to have this processed automatically. So what we can do is say, okay, we actually build an entire workflow with all those different steps. And so you also know step 1, step 2, step 3, and 4 and 5. Actually the same as in that first picture. But that we have also made with it so that we can use it easily now. Well, I'll show you. Look, well, I'm in this environment now. So I have here, in the first step, I indicated, okay, well, you need to monitor a mailbox and you also need to download the attachments from it. And eventually you need to determine whether this is actually a sales order email or if it's about something entirely different. Well, there's a bit of logic behind that. If you say it's always a sales order, then I will at least proceed with this process. If it's something else, then I do something different. And then sometimes, of course, nothing, because then it's not meant for me and I just leave it neatly. Well, and so you see that in those next steps, he will look at those attachments. He will also extract the data from them with an agent. And that's how we connected it all together. Now, if I look at it now, and then I'll just run it. Well, what we also see, and then I go back to the beginning. So now he is indeed processing that order. So you see here, he is now extracting the data. He is retrieving some more data. He is going to validate that. Then he applies business rules. And finally, I am done and have processed it. If all goes well, he does that too. And in this setup, I also made an example where we also send the email. So we indeed see that he has just created that XML message, but that he has extracted all the data from that PDF and placed it there. This now goes via email, but I could also, of course, directly use the ERP system. So this is an example. You can clearly see how that, how that works in practice and how you can orchestrate it properly, as it were, to ensure that you can automate these kinds of things with the help of those smart agents. Well, in the end, I have this PDF file. I have processed it. And an order has also ended up in the system that has been processed in the same way on this email. Well, this is super powerful because you can actually create these kinds of solutions very quickly. But just to give an example, and now you can also add all kinds of existing agents, but also create new sites yourself. Well, an existing agent is, for example, one that can convert speech to text and also understand it the other way around. So with that, you can also create applications that are essentially an AI model where you can, for example, have a human interaction. Well, I have another example here. The sound is a bit soft, so turn it up as much as possible.
We have a owner.
Maybe, but I will not completely let it go. But what you see here is actually just a phone conversation. So one of our employees, Thomas, is now having a conversation with an AI bot, and that bot just responds. It understands your questions and also comes up with an answer. There's still just a slightly too long time between the question and the answer. It's like you had a long distance connection like you used to have when you called America or something. But anyway, that is also something that relatively quickly gets better. So you see how this kind of technologies can actually be used in a lot of ways.